Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Special interview on this one. This is in place of the betting show, which is taking a week off this week and maybe needs to take the whole rest of the season off because we keep losing you money. So Austin's doing okay. Landis and I are doing terrible. But we have a great guest. It's Malcolm Jenkins, who has written a new book that is going to be released next week. It's called What Winners Won't Tell You. And we have about a 20-minute interview with Malcolm. There's a lot of stuff in his book about the NFL and about all of his activities off the field in the community with social justice, but there's some Ohio State stuff in there too. So it's a really interesting read. And Malcolm and I, we talked about his time at Ohio State, how he got to Ohio State, what he learned sort of at Ohio State. And again, it's pretty wild how this kid from New Jersey wound up in Columbus and wound up as, a truly great Buckeye. So we're excited to have him on. I think you'll enjoy this interview. Malcolm Jenkins on his book, What Winners Won't Tell You. All right, Malcolm, thanks again for doing this. We'll bring you in and we'll talk about this thing. All right, here we go. So happy to be joined on Kings of Columbus by Malcolm Jenkins. And Malcolm, I will say off the bat, people who have listened to me over the years know this. I've always said that this is my 19th season covering Ohio State, that you are my favorite player in terms of the combination of fierceness and ferociousness on the field, and then like deep thinker, worldview guy off the field. So, to get a whole book of your thoughts was pretty cool. Why are you like that? It feels like you were like that as a young man at Ohio State, and I think anybody who reads this book or knows your career in the NFL, you've continued to be like that. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think I've always just been a forever learner. Like I've always been interested in figuring out the why to things, and it's probably because my entire childhood, I heard my father say, "You don't know what you don't know." And at first, I was really annoyed by hearing this saying all the time. It was like, obviously, I don't know everything I don't know. But when I really rested in that, it caused me to always ask why. So if a coach is telling me to, run cover 3 and you play 7 yards off, I wasn't just going to go do it just because you said it. I needed to know why so I can do it better and understand the totality of the picture. And I took that same mentality, off the field. When I look at society, I look at some of the issues. It's easy to just understand things as they are and say, this is, how things are always run, so you fall in line. But I've always raised my hand and asked, why is this that way? And you start to realize that everything is on purpose. Everything is deliberate. And therefore, you can choose how to, that's where creativity comes from. Mm-hmm. You understand the confines of whatever systems you're in, whether that's society or in sports or in business. And then you use your own kind of spin on things to maneuver in that space. And that's always been kind of in my DNA. And it's obviously, you see it a lot in the book. You'll see how I apply that mentality in a lot of different situations.
So Malcolm, the book, you arranged it. It's not a linear structure. It's not, I was born here, I went to middle school here. It's separated in chapters that are sort of like particular ways of approaching things in life. It's a very interesting way of doing things. But what you just said about raising your hand and asking why, there's at least one story you tell in that book where maybe that bumped up against coaches sometimes. Was that ever difficult for you, that if you're a raise your hand, ask why kind of guy, did you ever have coaches who were like, hey, I'm a do what I say kind of coach, I don't want you raising your hand?
Yeah, we usually we butted heads because I never stopped asking questions. And I had a lot of coaches like that, and I think any coach who's ever really coached me, especially defensive back coaches that see me every day, it was either you loved me or you hated me But I forced everyone to come prepared. And I think one of the best lessons I think I learned is when I began to ask those questions and I'm kind of disrupting the meetings. I remember Wesley McGriff, we call him Crime Dog. He was a first-year defensive back coach with the Saints. He flat out paused the tape, turned around and told me to shut the F up. He's like, sometimes you got to know when to be quiet. And after the meeting, he and I sat and he said, look, and this was the most humble thing I've heard anybody say as a coach. He said, you know this defense better than I do. So you don't need to come in here and disrupt the meeting asking why. You need to figure out the answers and then come present the answers. And that really changed how I looked at things as a player. Like, when things broke down on the field, I was responsible to fix it. And it began to look like I looked at things in life like that. Anything that's wrong, I'm responsible for figuring out how to fix it. And I think, those relationships take a lot of humility. It takes trust. I can be coached by somebody or yelled at somebody if I know that you have my best intentions, at play, and vice versa. And so, it doesn't work with everybody, but those who are really committed to winning, who are humble and get their egos out of the way, myself included, it's a lot easier. We can be more productive as a collaboration.
I always say, like, you can't slice up people's lives, right? And say, I like this part of somebody, but I don't like this part of somebody, because it all comes from the same place. So the person that you've been as a leader, both on and off the field, like, you're Malcolm, right? So I don't know that someone can say, hey man, like, why is this guy ask all these questions? Because that's who you are. But when you were at OSU, you're doing that? Are you doing that like freshman, sophomore year as a Buckeye, raising your hand and saying why?
Well, yeah, but I actually had was it Tim Beckman was the defensive back coach my first 2 years, and he was a teacher. Like, so I didn't even have to ask why. He was explaining why. I remember Kurt Coleman getting cursed out one day because he didn't know the entire scouting report like verbatim. He had to get up and recite some things and didn't know it. He tried to look like behind him and see what was on the board and got demolished. And so early on, I understood like the responsibility of preparation, to know your job, to understand the defense. And so when I got to the league, that was my mindset. I needed to know every single thing about my job. And if I didn't, I was going to ask, because, nobody, when you blow a coverage on Sundays, on Saturdays, nobody asks, hey, did you get the install right on Wednesday? Did the coach give you everything? It's on the player, right?
Yep.
So before I go perform, I need every bit of information, that I can get. I don't care if you get upset that you got to do some extra work or you got to take some more time in the meeting. I want to be as prepared as possible.
So in this book, again, there's a lot of sort of interesting back and forth between life and football. And again, it's under headings: fear, discipline, compete, sudden change, step up, poise, all these things, Malcolm. And I think it makes for a very interesting read because you're constantly back and forth. Football life, but also that feels like that's how you lived. Football life.
Well, I wanted people, as they read it, to feel that's kind of how it feels to be in a football game. Like, it goes back and forth from offense that is progressing forward, moving you through the timeline, but it's also defense where you're moving backwards, and it's this sudden change, from past to future to present. And I wanted it to be a visual experience that the reader could, whether you are a football fan or not, that you could understand and feel like you were in the game, like you understood the game, or you understood that moment. And so, that's all kind of part of the way I wanted to tell a story. Like I said, I'm 35 years old. I didn't want to tell a linear, like, hey, I grew up here, I did this. I wanted people to feel what it's like to be kind of in my shoes, the back and forths, the sudden changes of things, the things you have to persevere from, the inner thoughts and doubts. Because my life has been documented. We've watched these games, we've watched these moments, we've read the articles. So I had to tell it in a way that was unique to the reader.
It is, your voice comes through loud and clear. I just know you from covering you from your time at Ohio State, Malcolm. But I'm reading this thing and I'm like, well, this is Malcolm Jenkins, man. There's no smoothing this out. It feels so real. Was that hard at all to like get that through the editing process of like, hey man, like, I'm just going to tell you what it's really like? Cause I like that your voice is so strong in it.
Yeah. That kind of comes down to the process of how the book came to be. Like, I started writing this maybe 2 years ago while I was still playing. Okay. And because I was still playing, I didn't think I could write a book, in doing all of that. So we had a co-writer on board, and the voice just didn't come through the way that, you just described. And so about 30 days before the book was supposed to be due, we were stuck with a manuscript that we couldn't use. And so I had to write this book in 30 days myself. And that's why my voice comes through so clear, because I wrote every word.
Wow.
And so I really put myself into those moments as much as I could. I went into like a training camp mentality where every day I'm just, in this book, in my thoughts, making connections, and came out with something I was really, really proud of. I love the fact that it is in my authentic voice. It sounds like you're having a conversation with me because I wanted that to be the feel.
There's a lot of great NFL insight in this. There also clearly is Ohio State insight in this. And I want to ask about two things in particular about your experience at Ohio State. The first is how you wound up at Ohio State. I think people love the how'd you get your offer stories.
Yeah.
And your how you got the offer story of kind of coming to a camp, paying for it, not being one of the invited guys. And then they're like, oh, man, this Jersey dude can play. Were you shocked that you went in and earned an OSU offer like that? Did you know what you're going to do? And like, how do you think it changed your life that you went out and earned an Ohio State offer on a camp that maybe you didn't even have to end up at?
Oh, it absolutely changed my life. And that's one of the things about me that I think people don't understand. I love the game of football from an intellectual and strategy standpoint, but I never really had dreams of playing in NFL. I didn't think I was going to go to college to play football, but it was, just happened to go to Ohio. My aunt moved to Ohio. We went to visit, and my parents, to keep us busy, put us in Ohio State's camp. But there's one thing I love to do, and it's compete. And so when I was there, I kept getting pissed off at all the Ohio kids that were talking, Jersey guys can't play ball. Y'all don't play no football in Jersey. And so I tried to demolish every single receiver at that camp. I think Brian Hartline was there. It was like a bunch of other guys that recruits, guys they had already offered. And I just found myself just going rep after rep after rep after rep. And I'm watching as Tressel and the defensive coordinators and all these guys are paying attention. And then next thing you know, I'm in an office and they're telling me, hey, you might be the best, corner in the country. And I was like the 66th ranked recruit in New Jersey. So it was like, that kind of blew my mind. But that conversation just made me think, more expansive about what I could do. I started thinking about, well, maybe I could be the best in the country, or maybe I can go to the NFL. But I didn't really even know that about myself until I got out of Jersey and started competing against other people. And when I came home, that scholarship was sitting right on the porch.
That is wild, man. Yeah. So your aunt, in the book, you say your aunt lived in Westerville, right? Yeah. Actually, I live in Westerville right now. If your aunt lived in a suburb of Ann Arbor, would you have gone to a Michigan camp? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's
no, I wouldn't go that far. I don't know if my parents would have made that drive to Ann Arbor, but they were definitely driving from Jersey, that 8-hour drive from Jersey all the way to Columbus.
Crazy.
But like you said, it's crazy how, things like that happen, because she just moved out there. She was feeling a little lonely. So, all right, her sister wants to come visit. But if that doesn't happen, I don't go to Ohio State.
That's wild. That is wild. Okay. So then the second thing that I just found fascinating is the way that you sort of established it from reading your book, like a full experience and a full life at Ohio State. And that seems from the book to be particularly involved with your faith and your fraternity. And that idea, how difficult is it when you are playing football at a very high level, like you are at Ohio State, to have a full life outside of the football team? How did you manage that? And why was it important to you?
Well, it was always important to me because I felt empty in the first year I got there. And if you play at a major program, there's a lot of expectations. We were trying to go to a national championship, but eventually you want more out of life. Or at least I did, and I found that through my faith, taking me in different places, finding my fraternity that introduced me to a whole nother side of campus life that like athletes usually don't partake in. We are in the dorms to the facility, maybe our apartments, and that's kind of it. But this brought me into campus life with other Black students and other organizations, doing things in Columbus, getting into schools and doing things outside of the team really brought me, made me feel like home, to the point where my senior year or after my junior season, I had the opportunity to go to the NFL. I was graded to be a top 15 pick my junior year. And I forgo that, and I gave that up because I wanted to stay at Ohio State. Honestly, I was just having too much fun. I loved it. Like I wasn't ready to make football or my life a job. I was like, that's gonna come. The league will be there. I'll take the risk. I want to play one more year. I want to graduate. I want to enjoy my full experience. And a lot of that was due to the friends that I made, the faith I had, while I was on campus.
I can remember writing a story about you and your fraternity when you were there because you
Yeah,
were a step leader in your
I
fraternity.
remember
Right?
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I, again, in my time covering this team, I don't know that I've run across a lot of players who had that other kind of connection to a group like that on campus. And in your book, it feels like maybe you were a little bit nervous about how it would be received, you joining that fraternity. And then you went in and talked to Tress and you were a little surprised by his reaction, right?
Yeah, he's like, because I missed the team function, and Tressel was a guy. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late, and if you're late, don't show up. And I missed an entire team function because I was joining this fraternity, and so of course I had to go talk to him, and his response was not only did he know kind of what was going on, but he talked about his experience joining the fraternity and how he learned so many things, beyond just the academics. He's like, I learned more from that brotherhood than I did in school. And it made me have so much more of respect for Tressel and who he was, how he understood things. And not only did, I pledge, but after that, there were other teammates who were watching me. And we probably had Deontay Johnson, who was a fullback. He was above me. He was a team captain. He joined the fraternity. Rob Rose was another defensive end who joined the fraternity. And there's so many guys now since then from the football team that have joined the fraternity, mainly because, I was kind of the one that showed that it was safe to do such.
You raised your hand and said, man, I'm doing this thing, right?
Exactly.
So this experience, Malcolm, again, I don't want to say what you've done in your career on and off the field, like feels to me like it fits with the person you were at Ohio State. Again, the way you carried yourself at Ohio State on and off the field. When you think about what you did in the NFL and then what you've done with your life as a leader in the community, as a leader in social justice movements, what do you think of what you've done? Do you feel like when you left Ohio State, you knew something like this was in front of you? How have you, again, managed sort of the success on and off the field at the next level after college?
Well, I think it's two things. It's one, understanding that it's a look at what we've done, right? I've never, the things I've accomplished are all bigger than me, which is what I'm most proud of, right? So that means that I've had to find people to help bring these dreams and visions to fruition. Now, places like Ohio State, playing under Jim Tressel, getting that upbringing, it really prepared me to step into that role of leadership, to how to guide the vision of my foundation that has grown for over a decade of work now, doing work in 4 different states: Ohio, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, all the places I call home. To have that, you need vision. You also need support. My mom is the president, and we've got, volunteers and donors all over the country that support that work. So that's a look at what we've done. The coalition and the social justice things that I've done, none of that was on my own, power. That is a collective. And we were able to scale that to something that is now over 12 different professional sports where athletes all over the country can activate and get involved in whatever way they want in social issues. That is a we thing. And I'm only able to lead the collective because of the upbringing I had in my household, the upbringing I had and the experiences I had at Ohio State and Jim Tressel, being other leaders, seeing what works, what didn't. Troy Smith was one of my favorite, leaders because I saw how he demanded things out of teammates, out of coaches. He pushed buttons if he needed to. He talked to you on the side if he needed to. Those things are all tactics that I still use to this day when it comes to leadership and planning a vision for something larger than myself.
You mentioned in the book that James Laurinaitis was the best man when you got married. Yeah. He's coaching back. You want to come back and coach at Ohio State? I'm giving you the invite.
I like the seat that I'm in. I get to, I'm not as stressed out. Like I think I'd be a tough coach, because I want things to be done a certain way. And if you can't do it, I'm struggling on the communication part there yet, but I'm enjoying watching it. James and Brian, are doing phenomenal things. Even Marcus Freeman, I'm glad we beat them, but to see what he's doing now as a head coach, he was my locker mate. All of these guys, it's phenomenal to watch what they're doing, especially Brian. Like he's putting out, first round receivers every single year. So the development is huge, and I'm glad that they're tapping back into the guys that helped build that program.
So now that you've retired and you've written a book, what do you want to do next? You got a lot of life ahead of you, Malcolm. What are you going to use your time for?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of my time, playing this game, you sacrifice a lot with family. So I've been very, very intentional in spending more time with my kids, raising them. That's really the most important thing. And I've also set myself up from a business standpoint where I can take some time away and not feel like I need to rush into the next thing. So writing has been and storytelling has been something I've always been passionate about. And it's something I'm putting a lot of effort to now. So this won't be my last book. This won't be the last thing creatively that I'm doing. So I'm spending a lot of time writing, researching. I've been around a lot of artists, just understanding creative process. And that's really where, my life goes. I realize even in social justice work, I realize it's more impactful for me to tell you a story about someone than it is for me to hit you with statistics and policy and all of those things. So we want to change the world. We want to remember history, want to honor folks. That's going to come through storytelling. And now my platform is larger than just the microphones in front of me in my locker room. I get to dictate how to use that voice. And so, it's you see me back at like kind of this rookie level where I'm learning, I'm understanding things, but you'll see that voice begin to grow in the form of content.
Malcolm Jenkins, What Winners Won't Tell You, going to be released October 3rd. Yep. Malcolm, thanks for taking time to join us here on Kings of Columbus, and we hope we'll see you back in Columbus soon.
Yeah, I will be there next Friday, actually, and Saturday for the game. They got the Hall of Fame induction. I did get in. I got voted to join the OSU Hall of Fame this year, so that'll be awesome. So I'm looking forward to being back in Columbus.
It'll be great to see you. Congratulations on all of your success, and thanks for joining us here on Kings of Columbus.
Thanks, Doug.
So thanks to Malcolm Jenkins for that. We'll try to do more of that here, right? Not everybody's always going to be on a book tour, but I think you guys like hearing from former Buckeyes, from people who are doing interesting things in football and in their lives. So, we'll keep bringing you that kind of stuff here on the podcast feed. Again, no game this weekend, but Landis and I will have a show for you that should go up on Saturday, where we are going to draft the 20 best Ohio State football players right now. We did it in the preseason, and we want to do it again now after 4 weeks to see like what's changed, who's moved up, who's surprised us, who's impressed us. So we will bring you that football this weekend. And then, of course, just like constant stuff on the podcast feed from Jeremy Birmingham, from Austin Ward, from Bill Landis. And we really appreciate you guys joining us here to do all of that. And we certainly appreciate Malcolm Jenkins giving us some time. For now, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of Columbus.